You wake up, and before your feet even touch the floor, the heavy voice is there. It whispers that you are falling behind, that your daily efforts are pointless, and that everyone else has it figured out, except you. This relentless inner critic drains your energy and paralyzes your potential. But what if this voice isn't telling the objective truth? What if it is merely a shadow you can outgrow? The human experience is characterized by conflict, but the most devastating wars we face do not occur on physical battlefields. They unfold entirely within our own minds. When your inner critic tells you that you are not enough, it feels like an undeniable truth. It feels like an objective assessment of your worth. However, ancient wisdom traditions urge us to look at this internal friction differently. The Bhagavad Gita, a profound text that is part of the Mahabharata, frames this struggle perfectly. To develop our inner strength and uncover our internal values, we are required to combat against ourselves. In this ancient epic, the opposing forces are the Kauravas and the Pandavas. The Kauravas symbolize the human personality with its multiple defects. This is the precise anatomy of your inner critic. It is not the voice of absolute reality. It is merely the collection of your insecurities, your conditioning, and your unexamined fears. Opposing them is Arjuna, the hero who represents the image of all humanity. Each one of us fights, or will someday fight, the exact same battle as Arjuna. When we start trying to improve our lives, perhaps by trying to focus on a challenging project or attempting to break a bad habit, the inner critic suddenly gets louder. Arjuna felt this same hesitation when looking at his adversaries, realizing he would have to combat old, familiar shadows. The inner critic is difficult to defeat because these vices and doubts are anxious to continue governing areas of our mind where they do not belong. Ultimately, the fear we feel is simply the fear of the new. It is the terrifying prospect of breaking away from old, comfortable, yet harmful customs. As we often explore in New Acropolis, the real battle is internal, and the victory comes from knowing how to listen to the right voice. We have an inner master, a higher self, which speaks to us through ideas of love, total unselfishness, and genuine regret for our errors. We know it is the higher self speaking when we hear words that compel us to be better, and when we try to muffle that voice because obeying it requires effort. The critic tells you to give up because it is easy. The higher self asks you to persist because it is necessary. To defeat the critic, we must practice right action, working without attachment to the fruit or reward of the action. When you stop demanding immediate results and simply focus on doing the right thing, the inner critic loses its primary weapon, the fear of failure. To further understand how to neutralize the voice in our head, we can look to the ancient Greeks. History and mythology are deeply intertwined. While history gives us objective facts, mythology provides the psychological and symbolic evaluations of those facts. We must encounter these symbols to truly comprehend life. One of the most powerful symbols for the anxious, overthinking mind is the labyrinth. When your inner critic takes over, your mind feels exactly like a labyrinth, a confusing, terrifying structure where every turn leads to a dead end of self-doubt and over-analysis. In the classical myth, the labyrinth represents life and its trials. At the heart of this maze lives the Minotaur. In our psychological framework, the Minotaur is the perfect representation of the inner critic. It symbolizes blind and formless matter, lacking intelligence and lacking direction. Your inner critic does not offer constructive, intelligent feedback. It simply lashes out blindly, trying to consume your peace of mind. To survive this, you must become Theseus. Theseus represents the higher self, the human hero who acts as the guide of his own consciousness. How does the higher self navigate the maze of anxiety? It requires specific tools. First, we need the double-edged axe, which symbolizes willpower and the capacity to open new paths. Second, we must utilize Ariadne's thread, which represents memory and perseverance to walk the path, utilizing the experience that perfects us. The ultimate goal is to reach the center, the objective where the conflict is resolved and the light is found. Whenever the inner critic speaks, you must remember that you are navigating a maze. The voice is the roar of the Minotaur, blind and unintelligent. Do not argue with it. Do not try to reason with a beast that lacks direction. Instead, grip the thread of your past experiences, remembering all the times you survived crises before, and use your willpower to cut through the noise, moving steadily toward the center of your own consciousness. Let us examine another mechanism of the inner critic, its tendency to distort reality. Have you ever noticed that the scenarios your mind invents at 3 a.m. are vastly more terrifying than anything that actually happens in reality? The philosopher Plato diagnosed this human condition perfectly over 2 millennia ago in his Republic. Plato asks us to imagine an underground cave where men live chained, facing a wall. Behind them is a fire, and people carry various objects past the fire, projecting clear shadows onto the wall. These chained prisoners register their experiences by taking the shadows for absolute realities, and they mistake the echoes they hear for the actual voices of the shadows. Your inner critic is the echo in the cave, the terrible outcomes it predicts, the judgments it claims others are making about you. These are nothing but shadows on a wall. But because you have been staring at the screen of your own anxious mind for so long, you take these shadows for reality. What happens if a prisoner breaks his chains and turns around? At first, contemplating the real objects would leave him disconcerted, and he would judge the real world to be more deceitful than the shadows he was used to. If dragged outside into the sunlight, he would initially be blinded, and might even beg to be returned to the darkness where he felt comfortable. This is exactly what happens when we try to silence the inner critic and step into a healthier mindset. The light of truth is uncomfortable. Breaking the chains of negative self-talk requires us to endure a period of disorientation. But Plato assures us that gradually the free man realizes the sun is the cause of life, and he discovers that what he previously believed were mere shadows and echoes. This profound knowledge makes him deeply happy, removing any desire to return to his former slavery. This aligns with the timeless approach of New Acropolis, philosophy as a living practice. We learn that the ultimate aim of our internal education is to develop within us the idea of the good. When we step out of the cave, we cultivate the forces of the soul: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. We realize that the inner critic was never a monster. It was merely a shadow cast by our own unexamined fears. If the inner critic is a collection of shadows and blind instincts, the weapon we use to defeat it must be a sharpened, disciplined mind. In the inner war, we require the most powerful element in our favor, the mind. However, a mind left to its own devices is chaotic. Eastern philosophy, particularly the wisdom of Tibet and Buddhism, provides a highly practical framework for this. To stop the endless chatter of the inner critic, we must cultivate Dharana. Dharana is a state of perfect concentration of the mind on spiritual essence. The texts tell us clearly that without concentration, one cannot aspire to conquer wisdom, because in the anarchy of a dispersed, superficial mind, focusing on the ineffable is impossible. If your mind is scattered, your inner critic will dominate you. To hear the voice of the silence, which is the voice of our true spirit, we must maintain a distance from our senses, govern our mind, and prevent ourselves from thinking aimlessly. We must learn to close our senses to the great and terrifying heresy of separateness. The Buddhist tradition teaches us that suffering is an inherent part of life. We all experience crises, but understanding and overcoming these crises allows us to develop our internal potencies and makes us strong. The Buddha recognized that dedicating all our energies to a constantly transforming world where nothing lasts is the root cause of our pain. The inner critic thrives on this pain. It feeds on our attachments, our desires to control the uncontrollable, and our fear of loss. The cessation of this pain occurs when we channel our thirst for life toward our higher self, toward that which is permanent and stable. How do we do this? Practically, by adopting the middle way. Siddhartha Gautama famously observed that a loose string produces no sound, and a string that is too tense will break. It is only in the exact middle that it provides harmony. Your inner critic pushes you toward extremes. It tells you that you are either a complete failure or a flawless genius. It demands perfection and punishes rest. The philosophical mind rejects these extremes. By practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, which includes right effort, right attention, and right concentration, we bring the mind into a state of balanced tension. We learn to observe the critic without being crushed by it, understanding that it is just another passing phenomenon in a changing world. Finally, we must construct an environment where the inner critic can no longer survive. We must build a fortress of the mind, taking inspiration from the Stoic philosophers of Rome and the ancient wisdom of Egypt. The Stoics understood that true freedom is an internal state. For the ancient Stoics, the universe was an infinite, living, and unitary matter. The first fire, or spirit, exists in all beings. Marcus Aurelius advised us to honor the greatest force in the universe and to equally honor that same great force residing within our own person as it is of the same nature. When you allow the inner critic to verbally abuse you, you are dishonoring the divine force that resides within you. The Stoic practice revolves around accepting what we cannot control. Epictetus taught that we should never demand that things happen as we wish, but rather we should wish for things to be exactly as they are, and in so doing, we will always prosper. The inner critic causes suffering by demanding that the past be different, or that the future be guaranteed. By returning to the present moment and accepting necessity, we cut off the critic's oxygen. We achieve ataraxia, not an unproductive stillness, but a profound peace that stems from virtue and inner harmony. True freedom is the ability to freely obey what necessarily happens. Within the philosophical frameworks taught at New Acropolis, we find that this internal order reflects the ancient Egyptian concept of Ma'at. Ma'at symbolizes truth, order, rule, rectitude, and justice. The ultimate good is establishing Ma'at within the human being. When your internal world is chaotic and ruled by the critic, you are living in Isfet, or decay. To restore Ma'at, we must be like the true pyramid. A true pyramid is a model of responsibility. It rests firmly on the ground, with a central core supporting the pillars around it. Your mind must have this stable core. You must cultivate a heart that is like a granary storing all types of responses, choosing only to express the good ones while keeping the bad ones contained. Silencing the inner critic is not about silencing your mind completely. It is about replacing the voice of the Minotaur with the voice of wisdom. It is about stepping out of the cave, tightening the strings of your mind to the perfect middle pitch, and honoring the stoic fire within. To silence your inner critic, you cannot just read about philosophy, you must live it. This practical approach to ancient wisdom is exactly what we teach at New Acropolis. Philosophy is not just a theory, but an active pursuit of inner mastery. New Acropolis has dozens of physical schools spread across the country in the United States for those who want to practice this philosophy in real life, alongside a community of strong, like-minded individuals. If you are ready to stop listening to the shadows and start cultivating your higher self, we invite you to join us. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more practical wisdom, and check the links in the description below to find a New Acropolis branch near you. The real journey begins today.